This is a presentation in how education is squashing critical thinking and awareness. Why don't today's primary, secondary, and collegiate educators understand their role in a society's uncontrolled, self destructive, and violent behavior? Hello, my name is Andrew Jackson, and I am founder and director of the Center for Symbiotic Psychology. Symbiotic psychology accentuates the evolved symbiotic synergy between mind, body, emotions, and awareness. This work is dedicated to the University of Wisconsin long distance runner who committed suicide, Sarah Schultze. We taught her how to run, not how to live. Before we begin, I would like to cover a couple of definitions. First being cognition. Cognition and cognitive behavior are about the activities of the mind, such as thoughts, memories, beliefs, imaginings, perceptions, discernment, and reasoning. This is what goes on between the ears. Emotions are the feeling good or feeling bad perception of changes and states of physiological being in the brain and body. This is analogous to pain. To perceive pain from stubbing your toe, there must be a sequence of physiological changes within both the brain and the body. Nearly 3,000 years ago, the very first line of Homer's Iliad laid the foundation for today's psychology of emotionally driven behavior. Goddess, sing me the anger of Achilles, Peleus' son, that fatal anger that brought countless sorrows on the Greeks and sent many valiant souls of warriors down to Hades, leaving their bodies as spoil for dogs and carrion birds. For thus was the will of Zeus brought to fulfillment. Homer inscribes anger as the cause of Achilles' behavior. Achilles' anger brought countless sorrows upon the Greeks. Achilles' anger sent many valiant souls of warriors down to Hades. Over the last 3,000 years, every culture has developed a shared linguistic development of core beliefs and conceptual understandings of emotions, emotionally driven behavior, and emotional dysfunction. How do the twists and turns of emotionally driven behavior drive the plot lines in these literary works? Mark Twain's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Dickens's Great Expectations, Poe's The Raven, Austen's Pride and Prejudice, the works of Shakespeare, the Bible, Quran, Torah, and Upanishads. The linguistics of emotionally driven behavior is foundational to the understanding and comprehension of a culture's literature, songs, movies, videos, plays, society, religion, and law. For students to understand, accept, and discuss literary plot lines, themes, and logic, our language, literacy, and literary educators are neurolinguistically programming and reinforcing a suspension of disbelief and critical thinking into today's psychology and theory of emotionally driven behavior, where dangerous emotions can drive destructive behavior, emotional dysfunction and disorder, emotional regulation, management, and control. The brain is neuroplastic, which means that more advanced and intricate cognitive emotional plot lines in such works as Shakespeare reinforce habitually used neural networks and strengthen even further the suspension of disbelief and critical thinking into other avenues of thought, reason, and logic. A theory of emotionally driven behavior is the foundation of well researched and evidence based therapies such as mindfulness, where a person is being cognitively and emotionally aware with an acceptance and without judgment nor reaction, or cognitive behavior modification therapies, where a person is coached to change their thoughts or other cognitive activities that changes how they feel, which changes behavior, and three, pharmaceutical therapies, where pharmaceuticals are used to mitigate emotional biochemical imbalances which drive undesirable behaviors. A cognitive triangle process flow chart illustrates the interrelationships between thoughts, emotions, and behavior. Each influences the other and vice versa. Cognitive triangle process flow is the foundation for highly researched and evidence based cognitive behavior modification therapies and pharmaceutical therapies, which mitigate emotional biochemical imbalances that may drive undesirable behaviors. But something is not working. What went amiss for long distance runner Sarah Sochi, who committed suicide? Something is not working when yearly there are nearly 720,000 deaths by suicide worldwide. Millions of other people are being put through a school to prison pipeline. Conditions of incarceration are not conducive to healing, but instead amplify psychological injuries, and indiscriminate random mass shootings, murder, personal dehumanization, war, and crimes against humanity continue around the world. And we are witnessing the rise of a fascist America. When we improve the cognitive triangle process flowchart, might something be missing? How about the neurological, biochemical, and physiological changes and states of being in the brain and body? Let's develop a new process flowchart and see if we can incorporate physiology. If you look at your body's movement, it is a highly orchestrated change in state of neurological, biochemical, and physiological being. It is these changes in states of physiology that drives behavior. And remember, emotions are the perception of these changes in states of physiological being. What if we have emotionally driven behavior as current psychology and literary linguistics suggest? That would mean that emotion is both cause and effect of the same event, that is, changes in physiology. This process flow is philosophically unreasonable and illogical. If we have cognition, not emotion, precipitate these changes in states of physiology that drives behavior and that are perceived as emotions, we now have a logical process flow where cognition precipitates the neurological, biochemical, and physiological changes in states of being in the brain and body that drives behavior and are perceived as good or bad feeling emotions, moods, attitudes, and feelings. What else is missing from the cognitive triangle process flowchart? How about evolution? Good and bad feeling emotions have evolutionary significant meaning. What would happen if our genetic ancestors went to climb a tree or ford a fast moving stream for food or went hunting the savannas of Africa if feeling good, emotions, moods, attitudes correlated with an unhealthy physiology and destructive decision making? Would these correlations be conducive to genetic survival? Think of a stumbling, good feeling drunk blissfully getting into his car to drive across town during rush hour traffic to buy groceries. It isn't going to happen. What would happen if imagining these necessary foraging and hunting survival activities only brought on negative, bad feeling emotions, moods, and attitudes? Would our ancestors leave home to hunt and gather, feel bad? And what if breathing, eating, sleeping were to bring pain and discomfort? Again, would these correlations be conducive to genetic survival? There is an evolved correlation between emotions and physiology. Bad feeling emotions have significant meaning. I like to use a hot stove analogy. If an individual places their hand on a hot stove, there is a natural and evolved reflexive mechanism involving pain that forces us to remove our hand from the stove. Likewise, there is a natural cognitive emotional reprocessing mechanism where bad feeling negative emotions don't force but suggest that we move our current thoughts or other cognitive behaviors off the proverbial hot stove. Because bad feeling emotions don't force our mind off the hot stove, an individual has time to reevaluate their cognitive behavior towards good feeling, healthy cognitions. Emotions have evolved not to be controlled by the mind, as we have been neurolinguistically programmed for the last 3,000 years, but to guide our cognitive behavior towards health, well being, and successful decision making prowess. Bad feeling emotions, moods, and attitudes must have an evolved correlation with an unhealthy physiology, poor decision making, and destructive behavior. And good feeling emotions, moods, attitudes must have an evolved correlation with a healthy physiology, successful decision making, and constructive behavior. If this were not so, humanity would not have survived the evolutionary mill. Cognition, not emotion, precipitates the physiology that drives behavior and is perceived as good or bad feeling emotions, moods, attitudes, and feelings. Instead of a need for emotional control, regulation, and management in a mindset of emotionally driven behavior, because of evolution, we have a natural cognitive emotional reprocessing mechanism to avoid emotionally bad feeling, unhealthy, and destructive cognitive activities. And because of emotional evolution, there is a natural cognitive emotional reprocessing mechanism to engage emotionally good feeling, healthy, constructive, and successful cognitive activities. Where does our literary suspension of disbelief and critical thinking into the theory of emotionally driven behavior go wrong? What is wrong with the literary suspension of disbelief and critical thinking that emotions must be controlled because dangerous emotions drive destructive behavior? Controlling emotions or emotional awareness, especially with pharmaceuticals, negative, bad feeling, destructive cognitive behavior may continue unchecked by our natural cognitive emotional reprocessing mechanisms. Negative, bad feeling, destructive cognitive behavior, such as thoughts and visions of violence, manic ramblings, acts of suicide and suicidal behavior, and an ideology of violence and revenge by murder, rape, mass shootings, or war, may continue unchecked and continually precipitate a destructive and unbalanced biochemistry, neurology, and physiology to the point where there is no conscious awareness of right and wrong behavioral control. What is wrong too? In psychology, cognitive behaviors, not emotional awareness, precipitate our biochemical imbalances. Psychological biochemical imbalances are a result of unchecked psychological and dysfunctional cognitive behavior. Pharmaceutical therapy that limits emotional awareness is sabotaging the individual's natural cognitive behavior control mechanisms, which depend on emotional awareness. Pharmaceutical therapy without complementary cognitive emotional reprocessing management therapy and education will allow an individual to continue bad feeling cognitive behaviors and the precipitation of biochemical, neurological, and physiological imbalances, disorders, and dysfunction. What is wrong, three, is that there is an unrecognized natural defense against illness, infections, disease, and injury. By actively using emotions to guide cognitive activities towards good feeling behaviors, a person is actively influencing their own biochemistry towards a healthy biochemistry and physiology. By being emotionally unaware or unresponsive, destructive, bad feeling, emotionally negative cognitive activities will continue to exacerbate the biochemical imbalances of their illness, and a person will disrupt one of their natural and evolved defenses based on cognitive emotional reprocessing management and activities. Exit. What is wrong for is that if an individual doesn't understand that their own emotions are about their own cognitive activities, instead of controlling their own cognitive behavior to feel good, they're going to strive for the power to control their external world of people, places, and events. Feeling good becomes dependent upon controlling an external environment. Ideologies of power and control by sabotage, deceit, violence, aggression, and war at both the micro and macro levels are unchallenged. What is wrong 5 is that literacy can adversely affect natural cognitive emotional development for health, well being, and success. Current language and literacy education teach that emotions, attitudes, moods, and feelings drive behavior and promote and actively train an individual into a belief that dangerous emotions can drive destructive behavior. Therefore, emotions, not cognition, must be controlled, regulated, and managed, even with pharmaceuticals. And because of the necessary suspension of disbelief and critical thinking for a student to comprehend, discuss, and be tested on emotionally driven behavior and emotional control plot lines, a student becomes neurolinguistically programmed to ignore their own evolved cognitive emotional reprocessing mechanisms that use the very existence of negative, bad feeling cognitive activities to understand, develop, and pivot towards new, positive, good feeling cognitions that promote health, well being, and constructive and successful decision making prowess and abilities. What is wrong 6 is justice based on falsehood is itself false and unjust. Criminal law and criminal justice are erroneously based on the limiting linguistics of emotionally driven behavior and emotional or lack of control, i.e., crimes of passion and aggravated behavior. Current statistics on recidivism and crime are based on a limiting psychology of emotionally driven behavior. Statistics based on the symbiotic synergy between mind, body, emotions, and awareness will produce a more promising set of data. Criminal law and justice should be founded on a more accurate representation of human behavior. Emotion does not precipitate the physiology that drives behavior, cognition does. The current belief in punishment and incarceration as justice for criminal behavior all too easily amplifies and reinforces the psychological and neurolinguistic programming of this unwanted behavior. These laws may be usual, but within this new understanding of symbiotic psychology, they are cruel and prohibit the free exercise of religion, and therefore are unconstitutional. What is wrong 7? Mental toughness training and mindfulness training can result in ignoring cognitive emotional feedback, resulting in an unhealthy physiology. Current sports performance psychology is based in emotionally driven behavior psychology, emphasizing emotional toughness and mindfulness training to become unreactive to negative, bad feeling emotions and thoughts while ignoring emotions' evolutionary role in creating a healthy physiology, well being, and successful decision making prowess and abilities. This lack of emotional awareness and responsiveness will lead to poor learning or even an inability to learn, poor physical and mental health, poor attitude or inability to handle pressure, poor decision making, poor performance, mistakes, fouls, penalties, injury, sickness, extended recovering and healing, lowered self esteem and depression, and possible suicide behavior and death. What is wrong 8 is the promotion of biased and skewed cognitive, emotional, and physiological research. Current psychological sciences, such as psychology, sociology, education, law, etc., and physiological sciences, such as psychiatry, neurology, biochemistry, pharmacology, and medicine, are not factoring into their experimental design the natural cognitive emotional reprocessing mechanism that has evolved to bring a person's physiology into health, well being, and successful decision making prowess. Experimental results will be skewed in favor of those individuals who have resisted their language, literacy, and literary education and neurolinguistic programming into the ideology of emotional driven destructive behavior, emotional control, regulation, and management, and emotional dysfunction and disorders. How long will academic institutions of education, language, linguistics, literature, psychology, sociology, philosophy, and law continue teaching a limiting cognitive emotional dynamic regulatory language based in a 3,000-year-old literary and religious linguistics when there are yearly nearly 720,000 deaths by suicide worldwide? Millions of other people are being put through a school to prison pipeline. Conditions of incarceration are not conducive to healing, but instead amplify psychological injuries, and indiscriminate random mass shootings, murder, personal dehumanization, war, and crimes against humanity continue around the world. And we are witnessing the rise of fascist America. What is cognitive emotional health education? Cognitive emotional health education means developing the skills, abilities, and understandings to reprocess bad feeling, unhealthy, and debilitating cognitive activities into good feeling, healthy, and successful cognitions. Every teacher and coach should have their own toolkit and skill set to maintain their own cognitive emotional health, well being, and successful decision making prowess and capacity. Here are but a few suggestions and ideas to do something for yourself to get into a physiological, healthier, and better feeling place of success and well being. Develop hobbies and extracurricular activities. Go places, travel, go for a walk, get to the gym, go on rampages of appreciation, write, creative writing, journal writing, etc. Play an instrument, sing, or go into other artistic venues. Make use of personal religious ideas and beliefs. Develop meditation and breathing exercises. Practice I N statements of empowerment. Practice stopping the mind. Just don't go there. If all fails, find professional therapy and counseling. Here are some ideas for understanding what it means for developing your cognitive emotional reprocessing skill set. The idea is to have skills to find better feeling thoughts or other good feeling cognitive activities for turning pain into gain. 1. Restate and refocus from an unwanted feels bad to a wanted feels good desire and intended outcome. Reframing, make lemonade out of lemons. Reevaluate, wants, desires, and intentions. Understand how the intent emotional relationship establish what feels good and what feels bad. That is, if climbing Mount Everest, I want an ice axe, which feels good, not a claw hammer, which feels bad. Maybe this is not the year to climb Mount Everest. That is, no matter what you do, you can't get into the good feeling place for doing that. Reassess inherited personal, institution, and religious beliefs and logic. 7. Use feel good religious and secular teachings of compassion, love, and forgiveness. 8. Learn to stop. Don't start down the negative, bad feeling rabbit hole. 9. Learn to dwell within the good feeling places of success. 10. Use the not wanted to define and focus on that which is wanted and desired. Black Dog Institute in Australia uses student anxiety in primary schools as an indicator of potential future mental health issues. That is, if a student doesn't have the skills to move out of anxiety now, they won't have the skills in the future for more serious traumas. What can teachers and coaches do for their students? They can know, understand, and have the skills to utilize their own cognitive emotional reprocessing mechanisms. Are in nations' classrooms a system and structure of oppression for sabotaging their citizens' natural, evolved, and feminine heart centered psychology of cognitive emotional reprocessing as essential for an individual's health, well being, and constructive, nonviolent, cooperative, and successful decision making prowess and ability? Are a nation's classrooms promoting a culture of suspension of disbelief and the willing avoidance of critical thinking and logic to understand something that is unreal or impossible in reality, such as something in a work of speculative fiction, just to believe it for the sake of enjoying its narrative? What is our literary suspension of disbelief and critical thinking doing to an individual's evolved emotional guidance? What is the first line of the Iliad doing to our culture and society? Goddess, sing me the anger of Achilles, Peleus' son, that fatal anger that brought countless sorrows on the Greeks and sent many valiant souls of warriors down to Hades, leaving their bodies as spoils for dogs and carrion birds. For thus was the will of Zeus brought to fulfillment. Every teacher and athletic coach must have the skills, abilities, and knowledge to maintain their own cognitive emotional health, well being, and successful decision making prowess. Parent, teacher, or coach cannot pass on the skills they themselves do not have. Because joy has an evolved correlation with health, well being, and success, we have evolved to be joyous beings. I give you thanks for listening to my presentation in emotional wisdom. I hope you now understand the need for cognitive emotional health education in our schools. If you wish to further explore the next generation of human emotional psychology, please visit my website at symbioticpsychology.com.